it might be appropriate to just reflect for a minute what our colleagues in Ukraine are going through. And recall that our region has always had open homes, open hearts, and open wallets for refugees and immigrants. And I'm sure that we will do the same as called upon for the refugees from the Ukraine, just as we are doing for the refugees from Afghanistan and all other causes of refugee status. So just a moment of reflection on that before we get to our business. Thank you. Okay, thanks a lot. I'll entertain a motion for approval of the minutes of January 13, 2022.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. One other note that I wanted to make, Chair Randall is not with us tonight because she's engaged in a budget hearing. And as we all know, one of the most important things that we in local government do is to work on and approve a budget. So she's working for the public in another capacity tonight, and unfortunately you're stuck with me. So in the meantime, so the next item on the agenda is a transaction update tracking survey. Keith Jasper, I wondered if you could sort of give a summary of it. I think there are a lot of slides here, and we do have some business to conduct later on. So if you could sort of give us a high-level summary, and then we'll certainly entertain any discussion. Thank you.
Yeah. Snyder, thank you very much. I do have a slide for the work, and he's going to give you a quick summary of the highlights. I would just like to quickly say that this is the fourth iteration of our transportation perception survey. The original benchmark survey was done in 2015, followed up with tracking surveys in 2016, 2019, and this most recent iteration in 2021. All responses to the survey have come from Northern Virginia residents, and the survey provides snapshots of attitudes and priorities regarding multiple transportation topics. In addition, because this is repeated over a number of years, we're able to track longitudinal trends covering about 3/4 of the time that MBTA has actually had a revenue stream. So it really is a good parallel to what we're doing. The reason why we do this is to gather information and insights related to various topics, such as how transportation affects Northern Virginians' lives, how they hear about transportation, whether these are positive or negative perceptions, insights about technology and the future as far as transportation, and the all-important report card on the region's performance when it comes to transportation. It's a tremendously data-rich source of information that we use to support our own public engagement activities. And for example, starting tomorrow, we'll be sending out some what we call micro moments, which describe some highlights of the survey, and also through the authorities' regular e-blasts, such as Driven by Innovation, we'll be sharing some information as well through those channels. The survey also does provide insights related to transaction and the authority's strategic plan. So that's also very important information. How it's done, I think we'll come to that in just a moment. The important thing from my perspective, it's independent and objective, and we always keep our fingers crossed onto the table just before the results come out in the hope that they will say something good. But even if they don't say something good, you're going to hear it the way it was. We don't interfere with the results in any way. It has to be independent and objective. Each iteration of the survey so far has been conducted by Heart and Mind Strategies, a Reston-based company. I would say that they're a market research and branding company with experts in human decision-making. Steve will probably characterize it differently, but there you go. They cover multiple domains in addition to government and public policy, such as technology and telecommunications, financial services, hospitality, travel and leisure, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, medical devices, associations, including transportation associations. So they have a fantastic national, indeed international perspective, and we're very lucky to have their insights through this work. So in terms of who from Heart Minds, Dr. Dee Alsop is the co-CEO and founding partner of Heart and Mind Strategies, and he's been here before to talk through previous iterations. I'm very pleased to welcome him back this evening.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you for having me as a resident of Loudoun County and a business owner in Reston. I just want to thank you all for the work that you do here, the attention you pay to this work, and what a difference it makes for our region. I'll start out by saying that we've been doing a lot of work for a lot of organizations, associations, and brands and businesses who actually, this kind of tracking work for them has been showing a pretty negative and significantly negative impact that the pandemic has had on them. This is one of the few sectors in which you're going to see something that is quite counter the trend. Pandemic has meant people are not traveling as much to go to work. It means they have a little bit more time at home to follow other things that are going on in the world. And I think those two factors are going to impact what you're going to see as the results here, because what you're going to see is a phenomenal and very positive reaction to what the Transit Authority of Northern Virginia is doing, and higher awareness of you, who you are, higher favorability about you and what you're doing. So I think those are real things, but I also don't want to lose the context in which those real things are happening, which is the pandemic. So let's go ahead and get started. If you would, Jonathan, just quickly go to page 2. I just want to let you know the study came out of the field in December. We've been looking at it, analyzing it, and provided the report a while ago, and we're going to possibly report in February, but the timing just worked out better for this meeting with you all here. This study has been done exactly the same way, and I've been the principal investigator on it every year that we've done this for you. So the results are real in terms of what's being done. It's the 4 counties plus several of the cities that are in the region that are the ones that we're looking at. It's a sample of about 600 residents, 18 and older. And if it were a full probability sample, you would look at that as a margin of error, like plus or minus 5 points, and the things I'll show. So let's go with that. And Jonathan, if you jump to slide 14, I'm just going to give you highlights here of some of the things that we're finding. One of the things that we see, obviously, that I've already mentioned is just the increase in remote workers. If you look at it, you actually going back into pre-pandemic, you had almost 40%, the yellow bar at the bottom, who said that they would never work from home. And now that number is only about 1 in 5 say they're never working at home. The number who are working from home every day is just gone way up. And even after the pandemic's over, people are expecting they're still going to be working a lot from home, not going back to the way it was pre-pandemic. So that's a major factor that's kind of shaping the overall attitudes about the area. If you go to slide 15, Jonathan, the other thing you'll see is that this can also be kind of looked at in another way, and that is just a lot of people are working in the same county where they live. And so that's going to obviously reduce the number of trips and things they're doing. So if you go back to 2015, there were only about half of the people who were living in the same county which they worked. And that number is all the way up now to almost 70%. So that's just another way of looking at the same kind of phenomena. That's the highest we've ever gotten. And it's just reflecting the less need to be in the car traveling. Nevertheless, if you go to slide 18, even though people aren't using transportation, there's this super high number who say that they agree we need to be investing in regional transportation. As Keith mentioned, I do a lot of this work around the country. On average, I haven't done this at a national level, but if you look at the different regions that you ask, this number is usually about almost 20 points lower. It's almost like 70%. It's in general, people want to invest in regional transportation, but in this region, it's super high. It's one of the highest I've seen around the country in terms of recognition that that's an important part of the contribution to the overall quality of life in the region. And if you go to page 19, speaking of quality of life, this one's a little bit harder, but hopefully you have it there in your books you can look at. Just a couple of things of what is affecting quality of life. Well, what you're going to see is that the biggest change, if you look at that second item, that drop used to be 33% saying the biggest thing affecting my quality of life, the number one thing in this region was traffic congestion. And now that's dropped way down. It used to be 33% a few years ago. Now that's 16%. It's dropped way, way down. Affordability continues to be high, and now it is actually the highest, most concerning factor because traffic has reduced so much. You will see down at the lower end, a couple of things also increased: access, nature and the outdoors, and access to education. Those things have become a little bit more important. That's the relative hierarchy of what's affecting people's quality of life in the region. And you can see then that goes also over looking at a slightly different way on this page here that we're looking at. When we ask people specifically, these are 4 major things, to what degree are each of these impacting your quality of life? And what you see is kind of what I showed you before, that there's been a steady decline in the negative impact of traffic and congestion year over year, even predating the pandemic. And there's been a steady increase in the number of transportation options, the variety of options and alternatives. And these are very clear, very specific trends in terms of that impact that that's taking. And let's look at those options, because that's a major change in the overall picture and in terms of what the people living in the region are seeing and experiencing. If you look at it, these are different types of transportation options that they have. That first few there is looking at Uber, Lyft, and other rideshare. Those the green bar represents the percent people perceive that's increasing as an option, versus the red portion of that bar is decreasing. Almost 50% said it was increasing. These rideshare things a few years ago, that's diminishing. So the rate of increase is getting lower. That's kind of capping off. But look at taxi, that's actually showing a resurgence in terms of taxi as a share. And then look at what's happening at bike share. That's huge change, going from about 35% perceived to be increasing 2 years ago to now 58%. See that increasing, just a huge change there. Electric bikes is actually the highest percent on the increase of any of the items. That was a new one that we added. The zip cars and those kind of car share services, those are also on the increase. So you're getting a set of residents who are much more savvy as to their options and are actually perceiving that increase and participating in those increases as well. So let's move then on how you guys are doing. And this next chart on page 27 looks at kind of combining how you're doing on infrastructure, access to shopping and services, how you're doing reducing congestion, combines them all together to see the overall, how many people perceive that you're doing a good job. This is phenomenal. There are very few things that I track that show more than like 4 or 5 points change year over year. And it usually goes up and then down and up and down. This is just very clearly, and I think it's pandemic aided, but it's very clearly linearly increasing the public perception of the job you're doing. And so, you should feel good about that. This is real and it's quite significant, a 22-point positive increase in the perception of the performance of your job on the key things that matter to them over a period of about 6 years. Page 32, we're showing a little bit different here. Now we're breaking up how you're doing on a number of priorities like safety or building next to locating new growth near transit stations or investing in new roads, all these different things. The bars reflect the percent who are giving you a high score on your performance over the years. And that line is reflecting where it was this year. And almost on every metric, you're like 8 to 10 points better than we measured 2 years ago on how you're doing on these things. That's phenomenal. Part of it is, when I'm not exposed to the frustration of being in my car, I'm looking a lot more positive about everything that's going on. So I think that there's, we just need to be real about that. I want to continue to remind you about that, but those are still good things to reflect on. And I always advise my clients is you take the credit when you can and you've earned it. You've done a lot of things. If you were not doing things well, these would not be showing up. So I can tell you that. Page 40. This is now specifically about what we're doing here in terms of the transportation issues and the things that we manage as well. This is just how many people are hearing and reading about things. What we're seeing is that on a hearing and reading basis, that's actually declining That means you're not in the news as much. You may think, well, that's odd, then why are people so positive about us? Because if you look at what they're hearing and you go to the middle column, look how much what they're hearing and reading is now a positive. Okay, so what was going on 2 years ago, 3 years ago? All these things with Metro and Metro safety were huge items that were on the news almost every night. And so that was driving a lot of what I'm hearing and reading. It was very negative. That's pretty much gone from the picture. And Metro's done a good job of kind of reframing on it, refreshing the look, the view, the experience. And that's clearly being represented what you're seeing here. They're just not in the news on these bad things. And what the people are hearing and reading is just phenomenally positive, almost a little over 2 to 1 positive. If you're 3 to 1 positive, that's as healthy as you normally can get, and you're getting close to that territory. So those are all additional good things. And as you can see on page 41, okay, what is it that they're talking about? It really is being driven by things that they're getting in Mamata and the Metro experience pretty much is the big item there. But the things like improvements on I-66 and other work that you're doing on roads are also there. Just a couple things to wrap up. And if you go to this next one here, so where are they getting the news and information about transportation? I look at this and I see it's a reflection of, this doesn't happen on its own. It happens on concerted efforts by organizations to tell their story and get things out. And that's showing up on efforts that you're doing through television, but also social media. That's a huge jump in social media. And then also in website traffic is a little increase in the meetings, and our community meetings are also driving some of that. So you're getting more targeted information with people that are being effective. Lastly, specifically to Northern Virginia Transit Authority, that took a big jump. We went from about 1 in 3 people who had heard and read of an organization called Northern Virginia Transit Authority. Now it's nearly 1 in 2. That's a pretty significant increase. And most of it's a superficial level of familiarity. Mostly just heard your name. But you do have 1 in 10 who say they're very familiar, know exactly what you're doing. They're keeping their eye on you. So that's just kind of a breakdown on that. And then the very last thing is this is just looking at your overall performance over the years in terms of the planning, how well they rate you, residents in the region rate you on planning and implementation of planning other transportation solutions. In the Northern Virginia region is the first group that we'll look at. That's that kind of top half. And that went from only about 1 in 4 giving you a positive, excellent, or good score of how well you're doing. And now that's all the way up to almost 48%. That's an excellent score in terms of how well you're doing. That's an increase of over 20 points in terms of doing a good or excellent job. And then if you look specifically at Northern Virginia Transit Authority, similar pattern there, except for now at 50%, we're rating you guys in terms of doing an excellent or good job overall. That's an increase of 23 points. So as I mentioned, a really significant positive report card on your efforts and the work that you're doing. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, thank you very much. I almost hate that question because it's so positive. Seriously, now this is a great opportunity to dig into these. So, anyone have any questions?
I have one. So, what's the correlation? You almost mentioned that. You said, of course, if I'm not spending all the time in congested roads and I don't ride congested public transit, I tend to be more happy with my transportation environment. So how is that an explanation of that amazing result? I mean, is that also an explanation, or does it count as an additional condition?
I don't think it accounts for all of it. It can't account for all of it. That can have an impact on the ratings. But just the mere fact that many more people are positive, are hearing and reading about, know about who you are, what you're doing, are able to rate you, that's a real thing that doesn't have to do whether or not they're not frustrated with transportation and congestion. So that's something that puts aside and kind of controls for the effect of the pandemic. But I do feel like once people are back in the car and we have a lot more people there, these numbers, I guess I'm trying to prepare you. I don't think you can sustain these numbers. But but you will see that a lot of people are not going to be going back to work as much as they were pre-pandemic. So that still gives you, I think, a little bit of a halo for a few years before that goes back to where it was.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
This isn't about the ratings, but if you take some time later to go to page 51 of the report, which is just straight demographic data, it's very interesting to see the changes between 2015 and now. So for all of us who, particularly during election time, keep our eyes and ears to the ground and at least watch the demographic changes, there's some really impressive and significant changes in some data between 2015 and today. In terms of household incomes, the age group respondents, some changes were within 5%, but some changes were 12, 14% or more.
Yeah.
So
I would make a comment on that, simply that we are drawing a sample, and on the aggregate, our sample is really good, but as you break it down into some of these groups, it has less precision than actual census data for the kind of analysis you're looking at. But this will reflect generally those same types of things that you're going to see show up in the census.
Yes.
So just the follow-up on the demographics, slide 5, something that jumped out at me, 2021 city county of employment, District of Columbia, 6%. In 2015, 18%. That's a huge change.
the number of families, households with an income above 200,000, 11%, 20%.
It's interesting to your comment. I used to go down to the district almost every day for business. I've been about 3 times in the last 2 years, and I went twice this week, and I'm scratching my head. Why did I ever do that before?
Other questions? I have one question because you really didn't summarize it too much. Which slides tell us what the public wants us to do in the future? There are a couple in there.
Yeah, there are some others where we're looking at types of projects and kind of the different options and priorities. I don't have that one in front of me. Sorry, I didn't bring it. Yeah, I think that's slide 35, Chairman. And the ones that are most significant are, innovation, and also, in doing extended lines of the metro rail, the public transportation options that are going to be able to become available. And BRT is also very high on the list, and just the improvements in the highways and the transit system. But you'll see transit is 3 out of the top 5.
That slide may be something that we maybe could discuss in the future as well. So, thanks.
You bet.
Any other questions? Thank you all very much. Thanks for that presentation. Very, very interesting.
Thank you for your work.
And I know that if folks have questions about this, they're certainly having a lot of opportunity in the future to discuss any of these slides or any of the findings. So, thank you. I did want to especially welcome now Senator Boysko. Thank you so much for joining us. Delegate LaRock, thank you for joining us. And I know you all have had nothing to do over the last few weeks, but thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join us. And I guess the sound was off, and I welcome Anthony Bedell as well. So thank you. Okay. Next item on the agenda, we're now under action items. So Keith, this will be the public hearing date for the FY 2022-2027 6-year program. Keith?
And Mr. Chairman, I'll be brief. As you all know, we've been working on the update of the 6-year program. We had a call for project in July of last year, and the deadline for applications was October 1 of 2021, and the deadline for the resolutions of support by the governing body was December 3rd of 2021. So now we're asking you to approve May 12th as the public hearing date. That is the day of your May authority meeting. So, and we are providing for in-person comment or for people who would like to phone in as well. In addition to May 12th as being the date of the public hearing, we are also asking approval of the public comment period starting on Friday, April the 15th, which is the day after your April or scheduled April authority meeting, up until midnight on Sunday, May the 22nd. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, we are also proposing that we have an open house. Now, traditionally, we would have the open house on the evening of the public hearing. But because we are doing our joint public meeting with the CTB, NBTC, VRE, it's a whole host of agencies that are required to have a joint public meeting. Delegate LaRock, that was your bill, and we are going to do that. We are proposing that we have the public open house for the public comment period at this public meeting. So that public meeting is scheduled to be on May the 4th. So we are working on that as well. So we will have the open house on a different day, but we did want to capitalize on that opportunity. We believe that that was the intent of the legislation, if you will. So Mr. Chairman, again, we are asking that you approve May the 12th, it is a Thursday, as your public hearing, and then the public comment period starting Friday, the April 15th, and ending on midnight, Sunday, May the 22nd.
And this,
And the open house would be on May the 4th.
Right. Any questions or concerns? Entertain a motion to approve that schedule as our CEO just outlined it. For a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, item passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Approval of investment policy changes. That's the next agenda item. Mr. Longy.
Thank you, Councilmember Snyder. I will briefly summarize the staff report. As dictated in our policy, staff constantly looks at the market and the environment that the portfolio is in, as well as what we're seeing in the future. And our cash holdings have continued to increase. Basically because the authority is adopting projects at a faster rate than they can be completed. We had, as an example of that, we had originally had about $2 million expected to be appropriated in fiscal 23. That amount has grown by $176 million. So what we are proposing is to change the makeup of the investment policy consistent with best practices. We have identified some of the instruments that we typically purchase that we are asking to expand the maturity dates on those. When you expand maturity dates, you do want to do some things to limit your risk. And so we are reducing the percentage of the portfolio that some of these instruments, the maximum that we can hold within the portfolio. Going down under current situation, item G, and these items, for those of you that have a copy of the portfolio handy, are concentrated on page 9, 10, and 11 of the investment policy. We're proposing to reduce the percentage of Virginia bonds, state bonds, from 75 to 30% to reflect the expansion of the duration and other instruments. We're also proposing to increase the duration of county and city bonds, those not issued by the Commonwealth, but issued by counties and cities within the United States from 36 to 60 months. One of the drivers for that is it's very difficult to buy a 1 or 2 year municipal or state bond because they get snapped up by the bigger fish than us very quickly. So we've identified and done some research, and we're finding by extending the maturity period, we'll be able to participate in that area much stronger. We're talking about increasing the duration of the high-quality corporate notes from 36 to 48 months. Prior to the 2007, 2008 recession, high-quality corporate notes, AAA, were pretty plentiful. Now there's basically only a handful of corporations that meet that criteria, and it is actually shrinking. A lot of it is based on the higher quality credit standards that the rating agencies are presenting. We're also seeing that as the federal government unwinds itself from participating in the market, in other words, sucking up these bonds before we can get to them, we are hopeful to be able to get out there in that 4-year period. A lot of corporations are just not seeing it's worthwhile for them to issue debt in the 2-year timeframe or 3-year timeframe. This is kind of a sad story, but we are looking at increasing the duration of World Bank bonds from 36 to 60 months, and increasing the percentage of the portfolio from 15% to 50%. That is reflecting the fact that many of those bonds are now rated higher than U.S. Treasuries and agencies. So that is an exception to what I talked about initially, where we're talking about extending the maturity but reducing the percentage of the portfolio. This is an exception to that. Lastly, the policy allows us to participate in certificates representing ownership in treasuries. That is a tool that folks that are basically locked out of primary and secondary markets because they don't have the size when they purchase. That's a tool that they use. The authority is now going to the market. It's not uncommon for us to go in for a $20 or $30 million buy. As a matter of fact, in March 23rd, we are expecting to do about a $95 million buy. With that, I'll be pleased to respond to any questions.
Thanks very much. Chair Winchell, has the Finance Committee looked at these proposed policy changes?
100%.
Okay, thank you very much.
Because the
Question?
alternative will cost it. Lonnie could explain that. That would be great.
Yeah, if a delay in implementing the policy based on the current market conditions for 1 year will cost about $712,000. We're basically talking about opening up to a additional 2-year horizon. So that opportunity loss would be 1.4 million. That is just on the purchases that we have planned for March 23rd.
1 month. Okay. Questions? I have one. It sort of caught my attention that we're moving from 15% to 50% for particular securities in our portfolio. Can you explain that one a little more? That's
the World Bank bonds.
right.
And the reason for that is they have a higher credit quality than U.S. Treasuries and agencies. So then there are more of them becoming available. World Bank bonds are typically completely cash backed. So they're being issued more on a cash flow basis with 100% backstop of cash release.
And these bonds are supported by the World Bank in addition to whatever the issues are. Okay. All right, that just struck me as kind of interesting to go from 15% to 50% of your holdings. That's a pretty significant change.
And it's actually reflective of the declining credit quality of treasuries and agencies.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about these proposed policy changes? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
Any further discussion? Aye. Abstentions? Item passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda, approval of FY 2028 CMAQ RSTP recommendations to the Commonwealth Transportation Board. I'll turn it over to our CEO to explain what's in front of us and then an issue that is sort of embedded in this action tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it is that time of year again where the authority makes programming recommendations on the congestion mitigation air quality program funds and the regional surface transportation program funds. Again, we make programming recommendations. The law states that the Commonwealth Transportation Board is the decision-making body on these funds. And as I come to you every year, I do say this, we are programming for out years. A few years ago, we were asked, or we were instructed to program CMAQ and RSTP funds for the life of the 6-year improvement program. So we did a call for projects, if you will, and established a deadline of January 14th for applications to be received for the FY 2028 CMAQ and RSTP program funds. We received 42 applications totaling $244 million. Yes, people were being a little overly ambitious regarding the program funds. We have been informed by VDOT that the estimated amount for FY 28 is $80.5 million, with 23.7 of that being CMAQ dollars and 56.8 being RSTP funds. VDOT does provide the local match for both CMAQ and RSTP funds, and it's provided that projects utilize the funds within the established timeline. You cannot sit on these monies forever. For the CMAQ program, the recipient has 24 months to obligate the funds and then 48 months to expend the funds. For RSTP, the recipient has 12 months to obligate the funds and then 36 months to expend the funds. Per the authority recommendation, the recommendation will be taken to through VDOT to the Commonwealth Transportation Board with the CTB. We anticipate action at their June 2022 meeting. We did have a robust discussion with the Regional Jurisdiction and Agency Coordinating Committee at their February meeting. Now, for the most part, there was consensus. There was no discussion on the RSTP funding recommendations. There was discussion on the CMAQ funding recommendations, particularly what we call the off-the-top projects that we were recommending allocating funds to. Off the top, I mean, before we get into any programming discussions for any other requests, these projects, because they expand multiple jurisdictions, you know, these projects are for air quality, if you will, we tag them with the off the top category. So the Transportation Planning Board funds what we call the Transportation Emissions Reductions Measures projects or programs, if you will. This started years ago. I wish I could say I was a little baby, but I wasn't quite so small, but it was years ago when the region was a non-attainment area, meaning we weren't meeting the air quality standards set forth by the EPA, the federal government. So this is how we were receiving CMAQ dollars. The Commonwealth was funding these programs over 30-something years. Even when we became an attainment area, we continued to receive CMAQ dollars. So we were appreciative of that because we didn't want to slip back into being a non-attainment area. A few years ago, the Commonwealth did decide to fund the Amazon projects using a myriad of funding sources, and their portion of the CMAQ money was used to fund. And what I mean by that, in this region, or in the Commonwealth, if you will, NOVA gets CMAQ monies. Hampton Roads may get it. Ms. Hines, please correct me.
I think you're right about that.
And the state gets a share. The state utilized their share to fund the Amazon projects. And now we are at a point where the state, because they did fund the Amazon project, we were informed that they do not have any more CMAQ money to honor the full funding of the Transportation Emissions Reduction Measures project at the Transportation Planning Board. Now, we had a robust discussion. Timing is everything in a lot of cases, and I would say that this is one of them, because as you all know, and you will hear from Ms. Boehner tonight, the General Assembly, they're talking about the repeal of the grocery tax. And this is where a lot of discussion took place at the RJAC meeting. Oh, if they're going to repeal the grocery tax and not plug the hole left in transportation, because there is this perceived, and it could be real, but a perceived right now surplus for transportation, why should the region take on the responsibility of fully funding the transportation emissions reduction project? Now, I will say these projects are definitely valuable. They are definitely worth merit. We need these projects. They are critically important. No one said anything negative regarding the merits of the project. We really talked about who should be funding them at this particular time. So we had a lot of discussion at the RJAC about that. And the fact that the region, we're still trying to recoup that remaining $38.5 million to fully restore us from the $102 million that was diverted to Metro, or for Metro State of Good Repair needs, I should say. So because of that, I did tell the RJAC, hey, I will make the recommendation to the authority. They may like it, they may not. We as your staff, we just make a recommendation. So what you will see in the attachment, the request was about $5 million in total, looking at the terms projects for FY28. My recommendation is that the region funds half that amount. Again, it's critically important that we do have the terms programs. We need to make sure we stay in compliance with the federal laws. But given some of the discussions that are happening in Richmond and whether we have the surplus that's from the CARISA money, stimulus monies, which isn't dedicated revenue. We are talking about one-time revenue. My recommendation is that you as the authority make a recommendation to fund half. And that means you have really jumped or increased traditionally what we have recommended. Traditionally, the region has usually recommended about $400,000. So that is a significant jump, but it is not the full amount. The other thing I will note, again, this is FY28, 6 years from now. FY28 is outside the life of the Youngkin administration. It could be outside of the Biden administration, at least this current term. Who knows if he's going to be a 1 or 2 term president? But my point is, a lot of things could change on the federal level and what's going on with the Commonwealth. So, and we can always have an opportunity, even though if we make this recommendation, the TPB isn't at a deficit, because what they will be working on or asked to vote on next week is for FY23. They do not program out for the life of the 6-year program. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I will take any questions.
Could you repeat that? Thank you. Thanks so much. Questions, comments? Okay, I have one. If we take this action, can we sort of also protest the need to do it? In other words, for the record, say we're doing this to write to whomever, but we have concerns and it should not establish a precedent. Would that be something that might be useful?
I think so, because again, the General Assembly is still in session. As Ms. Boehner will speak to later on in the agenda today, we're talking about what is the loss, if you will, regarding the transportation dollars if the grocery tax is repealed. However, we're still looking at the IIJA and what monies will be a part of that. We do have some surplus, if you will, that we were informed by VDOT that we need to go in and program and make programming recommendations on. So I would say, we can say, hey, you know, we want to work with the Commonwealth. This is a very important program, but we don't want the full responsibility to fund the program after 30+ years to be diverted to the region.
Yes, Mayor.
And I agree, I'm concerned about the precedent in that sense, that they're breaking their commitment.
Yes, Mary. Since this all goes to you. Right?
Yeah, and I will say that I understand and totally appreciate how our region feels about any number of changes in funding sources. I think that this is kind of the wrong thing to fall on your sword about personally. And the reason that I think that is, actually, I think that there may be better ways to fund these programs that will be revealed as we learn more about IIJA and some of the grant programs that may come out through the EPA funding. That in fact, our whole region might be better served to say we're committed to this program, and we're also open to looking for a different way to fund this for our whole region, which I suspect Maryland and DC would appreciate because it would free them too. I personally, and this is me personally speaking, 2018 or 2028 is way out there in terms, and we've been all complaining about the fact that we don't know what the state of affairs is going to be in 2028 with money. I mean, we just don't.
Or next year.
Or even next year, but hopefully whatever changes are made, structural changes, by 2028, they'll be sorted. But I just think there are too many unknowns now to make this a big battle about the money, about the actual number. I think that you send a message by saying, we're stepping up for half. We're not stepping up for all. I think it has to be kept on the radar. I worked very closely with the commissioner last year to make sure that we were covered all the way through 2026. So we bought some time. Let's use the time to figure out what we really want to do in terms of going after funding for this. Is CMAQ the right choice? Is there something else we should do? Is there some other pitch we should make to the Commonwealth? But just personally saying, well, you've been paying for it for 30 years and you started paying for it when we weren't a non-attainment area, but now we are. We think you should just keep it up. It's not a very strong argument at all. So I hope people will move Monica's recommendation forward. I think that you will have to keep it on the radar screen past the Youngkin administration. And you will have to have a game plan, in the later years of Youngkin and beyond to be sure that this gets settled in a way that's acceptable. But it's not, in my opinion, it's not real money yet. 2028 is a long way. That's my 2 cents.
Yes.
Mary, could I ask you, so you said maybe there are other funding sources like EPA, others. So could this possibly then look at not only PM 2.5 and ozone, but also climate?
Well, so I think that's the interesting moment that we're in. And I think we don't know enough yet to answer that, Walter. There are things in the IIJA that are about resiliency and about air quality, so there's some things there, but the regs are not written yet. Jim would tell you that, right, Jim? So everybody, we're kind of waiting for the regulations to come out on all of these programs. The new Deputy Secretary, Jim Deasy's main job down in Richmond is tracking that bill and trying to figure out across not just the Transportation Secretariat, but the whole administration, who is best positioned to go for which money once we see the regs. So again, that's this is it's a moment of a lot of change. And this was innovative when it happened in the 90s. I think we're in a moment where we're going to see innovation again. And we should keep our powder dry. That's my opinion.
Yes.
So while I see the logic in this, and one thing that is pretty, one thing that I've been told many times is that the EPA is actually looking into reformulating the attainment goals. So actually bringing us again into non-attainment, which would make it even more expensive to adjust. So not that we are not taking the risk. I understand that we have to wait and see how it goes, but we have the time. But, I'm a little bit concerned that a payment will become again an expensive one. So,
Well, I think that's the moment then to have the conversation, right? I think you're absolutely right. And 2028 gives us time.
Okay, so, well, I'll call for, if there any further discussion. So what I'd do is call for a motion on the approval of the FY 2028 scenic RSVP recommendations for Commonwealth Transportation Board, assuming the $2.5 million contribution. And some sort of communication along the lines, I think Mary Hines suggested, perhaps tracing the history to underscore that we really are offering something here, and then to raise some of the funding issues. Does anybody have any objection to sort of that general approach? We approve the basic action, but we work on a communication along the lines that we've heard. Is that agreeable with people? All right, well, then I'll entertain a motion to that effect. So moved. Okay. The people taking minutes, is it clear enough what we're doing here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Always helpful. That's important for us to know, but even more important for us to taking minutes to know. Thank you. Any further discussion, questions, comments, concerns? Second. Thank you, Mayor. Okay, not seeing any other discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
No.
One no. Okay, thank you. That item passes with all yes and one no vote. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, approval of Arlington, Loudoun, Prince William County, City of Manassas Park, and Town of Leesburg letters of endorsement for rebuilding American infrastructure with sustainability and equity applications. CEO.
Mr. Chair, as you noted, the localities that you just named asked for endorsements for their Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity grant applications. And some of these applications or requests for projects that we received are projects that the authority has previously vetted, others are not. But part of our enabling legislation tells us that we are to try to advocate for federal dollars as well. So we do want to support our member jurisdictions in these funding applications. And the projects are listed in your packet.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Yes. Yeah.
I see on the suggested motion that Manassas Park is still not included.
It is, Mayor Rischel, I don't know if we updated it when we received the communication. So it does say Arlington, Loudoun, Prince William counties, and then the city of Manassas Park and the town of Leesburg.
Okay, because I picked this up over there.
Did you all print the incorrect?
I don't see it.
It's in the subject, but it's not in the suggested.
Yeah, that's, okay, it's in the suggested motion on mine. So we want to make sure that we read it correctly, but what I'm looking at, the city of Manassas Park is included in the subject and suggested motion.
Okay, so entertain a motion for the approval of Arlington, Loudoun, Prince William County, City of Manassas Park, and Town of Leesburg letters of endorsement for rebuilding American infrastructure with sustainability and equity applications. Entertain a motion.
So, second.
Thank you. Mayor Russo moved and Chair Wheeler seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. Now we're in the discussion and information items. First is travel trends update.
Thank you, Chair. And we've been doing this report from middle of last year. This is our fifth iteration of the report and the first one in this year. So we will start off with a yearly snapshot for the last year, and numbers are from a big data company, TomTom. They have collected hundreds of millions of GPS signals from cell phones, personal cell phones, and just connected cars, and they derive travel times on roadways. Based on their numbers, roadway traffic was coming back to pre-COVID condition, only below 8% for average daily throughout the year. But in the peak period, the reduction was even more prominent, about 24%. So our takeaway is while the traffic was almost back, there was still a shift in peak period travel demands, and this is consistent with what we've been reporting all throughout the year last year. Back to the Northern Virginia specifically, from VDOT traffic data, we have seen even more close highway traffic, which is only 4% below pre-COVID. And on the transit side, we've been checking a Walmart ridership. In the last quarter of last year, October to December, we have seen the continued upward trend in Walmart bus ridership, which is about 57% back to pre-COVID condition. At the same time, Metro Rail was within 29% of pre-COVID. We are aware of a number of local transit providers either already implementing or planning for a number of programs, incentive programs, like reduced fare, free fare, and standard service. Also, there are some statewide initiatives. TRPT will launch a marketing campaign to increase ridership from next week. So we'll be monitoring all these programs, initiatives, and we will track their impact on transit ridership and report back to you all in the coming months. A couple of more trends that we are observing is, you guys have all noticed the increased gasoline prices. So we will monitor the surges and see if that has any impact on overall travel behavior. Federal administration will bring back more workers towards the end of this month. That will have another impact. So these will be the topics of our next week. That is all we have for this one.
Thank you, Mr. Rashid. Questions? I do have one. So it's interesting that the road usage is just going slightly below pre-pandemic levels. The other thing, though, that's concerning is that traffic speeds are 6% higher. So I'm wondering, because that may be a major contributor to the degradation in highway safety. So I'm wondering if in the future you could include a section on safety and how are we doing there, and maybe that points to some useful things as well. But that's if it's faster as a result of less congestion, that's great. If it's faster as a result of people driving more dangerously, that's another issue. So, okay, any other questions, thoughts, concerns about that? Thank you very much for that report. Chair Wheeler, do you want to report on the governance and personnel committee?
Yes, one thing to report out before Ms. Boehner goes is that regarding the annual performance review for the chief executive officer, as was last year, the CEO will do a self-assessment at the beginning of April. It will be sent out, and then we are looking to have comments back or feedback back by the end of April regarding that issue. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. And then Ms. Boehner is here to give us our legislative update.
Oh, yeah.
Good evening, members, Mr. Chairman. Tracy Boehner here, for those of you who don't know me. Looking forward to seeing you all in person next month. Actually, I have a quick update for your previous conversation about CMAQ money, speaking to what Ms. Hine was talking about in terms of the state's strategy for accessing IIJA funds. Actually, at the March 15th meeting, CTB will be reviewing staff recommendations to develop, I think, 3 plans that speak to this. Staff is recommending that spending a little over $3 million to develop 4 significant plans. One would be a carbon reduction strategy in response to the carbon reduction program of IIJA, a resilience plan as part of a response to the PROTECT program, an EV infrastructure plan in response to, yes, the EV program of IIJA, and an infrastructure inventory and an inventory and assessment from the PROTECT program, which I think will hopefully deal with some of the concerns about infrastructure vulnerability from flooding and water inundation. So again, to speak to what Ms. Hine was talking about, they are going to start putting together these plans pretty quickly so that they can access the new federal money. So there, just want to put a little bow in that. General Assembly, we are 2 days away from the official scheduled sine die of March 12th, which is Saturday. And I think General Assembly, by and large, will finish their work by that date. I do think, though, we're still having a lot of discussions around the budget, and especially around what resources are going to be available and then the best way to spend that. So what may happen, because it's happened before, is that the budget conferees might not finish until Saturday or Sunday. The members, as a rule, now have a 48-hour waiting period so they can examine what the conference report actually is before they vote on it. So it may be that if Senator Boysko and Delegate LaRocca finish their work, that they can come home for a few days before heading back to Richmond to vote. I say this about Senator Boysko because she is a conferee on one of the major bills that need to be negotiated, and that is the repeal of the grocery tax. As the House and Senate have some differences of when it starts and whether it's a 1.5% or 2.5%. And then, they want to make sure they come to agreement on how to, in a predictable, sustainable way, replace funding for local government and K-12. So those discussions are ongoing. They're pretty intense. There's a lot of number crunching that has to be done. But the grocery tax bill, both versions of it do not have a permanent replacement for the half cents that's now going to the Commonwealth Transportation Fund. And there's been a lot of discussion in the General Assembly with concern not so much about the biennium impact, which is, depending on which bill it is and when you start, ranges from 188 over the biennium to 252 million reduction in transportation funding, but really more in the out years. As you all recall, in 2020, General Assembly, stabilized our transportation funding from state revenue sources. That was reaffirmed through a study by the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission just last year. So with the combination of formula, new federal money coming in, and state revenue sources that will remain or running a little bit ahead, the proponents of waiting to see what happens believe we will be okay for a period of time. But there is concern that we need to keep on top of it, that we can't allow the stability that we achieved in 2020 to go away. And so what is being proposed is that could there be a defined date where we take a look at our revenue sources and assess where we are as a Commonwealth to make sure we will still have sufficient capital and operating funds for transportation for all modes. And so one of the things that the conferees will be discussing is whether that's something that they can agree on. So I'm going to stop there on that issue. See if there are any questions or comments, and then I'll go on to two other short things I want to talk about.
I guess, Tracy, Senator Boysko, is there anything you'd like to say at this point? I don't want to put you on the spot, but if there is a message you want to pass on to us, please do.
Sure. Thank you. Tracy did a great job of giving an overview. As you're aware, the budget process, the negotiation process is pretty fluid, and we don't know what the final outcome will be until we really get the whole budget put together. Fairfax County Senator George Barker is the chief negotiator on transportation for the Senate. And I've had numerous conversations with him to stress my concern that we don't have something that spells out our need to preserve funding, but he is insistent that we will make sure that it is a priority and will continue to beat the drum on that. But he's also very confident at this point right now for the biennium, which is what Tracy just said, that we have adequate funding with all the federal funds coming in and the current structure. I would just point out also that the grocery tax is just one small part. I mean, we also have the grantor's tax and some of the other ones. And the gas tax is no longer on the table at all. So we can take some solace in that. But again, this is a moving ball. And I think that everybody in the General Assembly understands the importance of having a functioning transportation system. And I think you can count on me as someone who is very committed to continuing to push for that. And my colleagues are as well in the Senate and the folks who are representing parts of Northern Virginia, I think, get this 100%. So sorry that we don't have a full answer right now. I just got back to my room a few minutes ago. We've been on the floor since 10 o'clock this morning, and we'll be going back again tomorrow to try to see what we can get resolved. So thanks, Tracy. That was a good report.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if there's anything you need from us, please let us know. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Laura, did you have any comments you wanted to make on this or any of the other matters? Again, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you wanted to pass on a message to us, please feel free.
Well, thanks, Dave, and pleasure to be with you. Very impressive summary, Tracy. I would ask maybe that you send that to me. I might turn it into a Ford.
I'll do that, sir.
It's a little bit embarrassing when I go to an NVTA meeting and learn more about some of the session, but you're well represented, so good job. I kind of echo the comments that Senator Boysko. I have repeatedly asked for assurances on behalf of for the benefit of local governments in that transportation monies would not be victimized, that they would be backfilled and it would be done so in a sustainable, predictable fashion. I repeatedly have gotten that assurance from Les Adams, who has, I think, really been on the House side at least, been interacting with the governor. And so I hesitate to provide any assurance because, what comes out of conference is pretty, we have an up or down vote, but not much say in the negotiation. But there's a lot of money. There's a lot of big commitments that are being made by the governor, aside from the grocery tax and other commitments he's made. But I'm optimistic, and we'll hopefully Senator Boysko and I will have a good report for you. Actually, we won't need to. We'll go to Tracy to find out exactly what. But we'll be in there pitching for it, not just this year, but in out years as well. So that about sums it up.
Yeah, I need to give props to our Northern Virginia delegation who have been very vocal on this issue about transportation funding sustainability. I think we should, give them all great props for their willingness to, frankly, the region that has been most vocal about this in the General Assembly. So thank you both and thank your colleagues.
Yeah, we know we'll have to answer to you, Tracy, if we don't.
That's right. As I stalk you in your office. Two quick things. You all recall that Senate Bill 251 from Senator Servo was an effort to try to find dedicated funding for pedestrian and bike facilities or traffic calming facilities that were not connected to a road widening. In his vigor to do that, his initial thought was to dedicate money out of the regional parts of Northern Virginia Transportation Authority Fund. Because of the very strong negative response from the authority, local government, business community, and colleagues in the General Assembly, he did eventually amend his bill to just be a study that VDOT would host with stakeholders in Planning District 8 to assess 20-year needs, look at what the cost would be, and suggest some revenue ideas that would be reported in 2023. When the bill passed the Senate, when the bill got to the House, it went to a non-transportation committee, which I think sort of contributed to this. When it got to the House floor, there had been a policy from House Transportation this year not to create new studies for VDOT or DRPT in particular, to allow the new administration to get in place, get their feet under them, and put their plans together. And so a lot of, actually all bills that had new studies or new or significant changes, and this happened to one of Delegate LaRocque's bills, were carried over for a year or set aside with the understanding that these are topics that we would be willing to come back to, but just not this year. So in the end, the House did take the Senator Surville's bill and set it aside. The other major thing that we had been tracking, the Transit Ridership Incentive Program, TRIP, though the amendments are moving forward the way we thought, where is that at least 25% of the funds would be used for zero or low fare projects. At least 25% of the funds would be used for regional long distance commuter routes, which is a very Northern Virginia thing. So that's a great pot for us. And then the CTB would have discretion on how to allocate the remaining 50%. I will say also the Senate budget contained $10 million on general fund money over the biennium to further provide money for regional long-term transit commuter route service, which is again very much of a Northern Virginia, whether it's PRTC, OmniRide, and our local transit systems. And then the other thing, as you all remember, there's been a lot of discussion about whether the Commonwealth would grant public bodies additional flexibility to have all virtual meetings. And a House Bill 444 from Delegate Elizabeth Bennett Parker of Alexandria was introduced to recommend implementation of a decision made by the FOIA Council over the end of last year. In the end, when the bill got to the Senate, they were just not ready to pull the trigger for all public bodies. And so the bill was amended to allow advisory bodies in particular to have if their parent body decided by policy, and there's some guidelines around it, but that advisory bodies would have the ability to have all virtual meetings as long as there was sufficient public access, public notice, public participation. So that is the version of the bill that will go to the governor for review. And I'm actually going to stop there. I know it's 8:25, it's late. So unless anybody has any other questions, I'm happy to answer those, but otherwise that's my report tonight.
Very much. Yes, sir.
Tracy, what happened with the with revenue sharing? Is that?
Oh, from the budget.
Yeah.
Actually, they didn't touch Governor Northam's proposed amendments.
Oh, that's great.
Yes. So actually, I will say this has probably been the quietest transportation year we've had in some time. But the additional funding from the surplus from 21 was kept intact. So none of the House or Senate did not touch that proposal. So you will have those additional revenue sharing monies to put back into projects for local government. At least as of today.
Yeah. Any other questions? Well, Tracy, thank you so much. And Delegate LaRocque, if there's anything that we can do to be helpful, please let us know. We want to support your efforts. And Senator Voice-O, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I will make a comment about the Surville bill. I agreed that I did not like the setting aside, but the fact of the matter is that funding sidewalks and things like that is something that's very important and surprisingly difficult to do. So hopefully, regardless of what happens in this session, it's an issue that won't get lost. So on behalf of a number of jurisdictions, that's an important issue. Anyway, thanks much. Any other questions? I appreciate it a lot. Thank you all for the work that you do for all of us in the public. Appreciate it a lot. Okay, next item on the agenda is the Finance Committee report. Rachel, you have been busy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief. The Finance Committee met on January 20th and discussed duplicate payment audit reports and audit services. The committee unanimously recommended adoption by the full authority of changes to the investment policy for action we approved earlier this evening. And the Finance Committee met earlier this evening and recommended adoption of the budget at the April authority meeting. Mr. Long, do you have anything to add?
I mean, investments, revenue, and operating budget, I don't have anything to add to the staff report, but I will note that all indicators are very positive for all.
Thank you very much. That is something that people need to focus on in our next meeting, the approval of the operating budget, because there is some necessary staffing that is being added. So people need to focus on that. Very good justification for it, but just keep that in mind for next month. Thank you very much. CEO's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report is in your packet. What I will add, because we are rounding up the committees again to meet. I know you guys have had some time off, but now we do need the Planning and Programming Committee to meet. Thank you, Mayor Wilson. The Technical Advisory Committee and the Planning Coordination Advisory Committee, as we begin to bring forth some of these final evaluations and analysis for the 6-year program update. While it wasn't in your packet tonight, for the April meeting, we will have the materials that we anticipate bringing forward as part of the public hearing and the public comment period. And that's a great segue for April. It has come to our attention that Chairman McKay, and you too, Supervisor Alcorn, the whole entire Fairfax County Board has a budget hearing on April the 14th. And that is a problem for us because of voting and quorum issue. So I would ask, and I know it's getting late, so we can reach out to you through email if you would like to meet April the 21st. In lieu of canceling the April meeting.
I'll just run roughshod over.
Yes, let's do that, please. Thank you.
In my dream for you.
Good if you had the votes.
You're not here, we do.
Yeah, for those of us who were around when this was created, let me put it this way, Jerry Conley did a good job of protecting us all, but especially Fairfax County.
So you want to shift from the 14th to 21st?
Yes, I want to push the April authority meeting back 1 week.
Is the option that it be canceled? And if we were to cancel, what are the ramifications?
So if we cancel, I would have to email you the materials that we have for the public comment period and public hearing. And if you have a question, you would have to pick up the phone and call me. We don't have these discussions via email. But the other thing is, instead of having our budget on the agenda for the April meeting, we would have to have it on the agenda for the May meeting. And we really would need everyone to show up so that we can take action. You know, then we're starting to get into the tight window frame, if you will.
I think the spring break, so I was gonna be out of town anyway. So I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I'll be away. So, I'm sorry, didn't mean to walk out your words. Shall we hold the date then, April 21st?
Please do. And tomorrow we will send out an email just confirming availability for April the 21st.
Does that mean we are going to meet, or that remains to be seen?
If we can have a quorum, we are going to meet.
It's better to meet than to not meet because of what Ms. Backman said about the budget.
Now, and remember, your May meeting is public hearing. Now, I don't know how many people that are going to register, show up in person or not, but the last time we had a public hearing, the town of Hillsborough did bring every member of a citizen of the town to the public hearing, and it was about 3 hours long. So I would just say that. After the conclusion.
Well, I tried to get the thing canceled, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So save April 21 on your calendars.
And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks very much. Chair's comments, I don't have any. Should I have any?
No.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else they want to bring up this evening? Not seeing any. Thank you all very, very much. I entertain a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Say aye. Opposed? Thank you all very much. Thank you.